Welcome to our session today entitled Sustainable School Improvement Practices and Outcomes via Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. My name is Jennifer Collins and I'm the statewide lead consultant for the MTSS initiative in Pennsylvania. The mission of the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network is to support the efforts and initiatives of the Bureau of Special Education and to build the capacity of LEAs to serve students who receive special education services. Our goal for each child is to ensure individualized education program teams begin with the general education setting with the use of supplementary aids and services before considering a more restrictive environment. Through the content we will review together, the intent is to help MTSS implementers sustain evidence-based practices and better outcomes for all students. Our discussion will be based upon the origin of tiered models, the implementation science, and school improvement tips. Let's begin by reviewing the conceptual underpinnings of a tiered system of support. Schools can help build individual and collective understanding from the get-go by using a common language. Tiered models have been called different names over the course of time, but the essence of tiered systems has not changed. Another step toward common understanding is to differentiate between what MTSS is and what it is not. For example, MTSS is an outcomes-driven model. It is not a gate to prevent special education determination. MTSS is also not just another name for Pennsylvania's model. Take a moment to review this slide. Prevention is the work within MTSS. It is a public health model that was designed to ameliorate and or mitigate high incidence problems among the general population. Literacy and behavioral health difficulties are seen as those high incidence problems. Tiered models first originated through the work of the National Institute of Child Health and Development. Their educational research program was initiated in 1965. The NICHD work focused on reading difficulties because it was clear how extensive the reading problem was in the general population. NICHD was charged with improving the quality of reading research by conducting long-term, prospective, longitudinal, and multidisciplinary research. Readline led the new charge by closely coordinating the work of over 100 researchers in medicine, psychology, and education in approximately 14 different research centers. The NICHD research program produced a body of highly replicable findings in the area of early reading acquisition and reading disabilities that have been reported in over 2,000 refereed journals since 1965. The NICHD studies revealed the power of tiered systems relative to the prevention and treatment of reading difficulties. This slide shows the amount of intervention that led to a reduction in the percentage of students with reading risk. In most cases, students responded to tiered intervention and in some cases with as little as 35 hours or less of supplemental intervention. But what about behavior? A national and international literature review found that an average of 17% of young people experience an emotional, mental, and/or behavioral disorder. According to youth.gov, substance abuse is the most common diagnosis for young people today, followed by anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorders. By definition, then, Pennsylvania's multi-tiered system of support is a standards-aligned, comprehensive school improvement framework for enhancing both academic and behavioral health outcomes for all students. In Pennsylvania, response to intervention refers to the methodology that is used to determine how low is low and how slow is slow as an alternative to ability achievement discrepancy within the specific learning disability process. Your MTSS model should represent an integrated system whereby practitioners become very skillful over time at using a problem-solving process to integrate academic and behavioral goals, data, and evidence-based practices across and within each tier. Pennsylvania's multi-tiered system of support also relies upon these cornerstones: cross-disciplinary teaming, use of evidence-based practices, progress monitoring using a continuum of reliable and valid data sources, and all of that data is used to inform instructional intensity and what we call response to intervention. It should also be emphasized that tiers represent increasingly intensive supports matched to need. Tiers are not specific programs methodologies per se. These are the key components that form the foundation of Pennsylvania's MTSS framework. It's not that MTSS is another thing on the plate. Maybe instead, MTSS is the plate. It is the work if a well-articulated, well-designed system is in place. You should realize a system that's efficient, effective, durable, and sustainable. You will have the capacity to implement priorities and additional initiatives. MTSS is truly a framework that holds all these elements in place as the big picture. A problem-solving process occurs at the system, grade, and individual levels within a tiered system and is characterized by the use of database decision-making and the adoption of evidence-based practices matched to student need as mentioned previously. When we refer to problem-solving, we're referring to the continuous school improvement cycle that we enact at all levels within a system. What is the problem? What are we going to do? We do it, and then we evaluate whether it was effective. As a result of problem solving, practitioners often experience a major conceptual shift because MTSS puts the problem in the context of alterable variables and moves it outside of the student. When the focus of team meetings is on the discovery of instructional changes that enable learning, the content of the meeting is quite different from one focused on the discovery of a disability. In an MTSS approach, we're focusing on what we can do or what supports we can put in place to help students be successful. MTSS is a comprehensive school improvement framework. RTI refers to the methodology that we use to determine student response, which often includes the use of progress monitoring data to calculate growth over time, or what we call rate of improvement. Now that we've reviewed the conceptual underpinnings and origin of tiered systems of support, let's review the implementation science to help us with sustainable practices and outcomes. Sustainability is the capacity of a program to withstand significant changes in context while continuing to yield improved results. As Century and Levy would say, it's about holding firmly to the core values of the organization and using them to guide the evolution of the program as changes come and go, all the while keeping an eye on the outcomes. The implementation science tells us that to maintain and sustain practices and outcomes that we will be required to be highly adaptable as we make significant changes. These changes may include turnover of key staff, reduction or loss of funding, and/or district emphasis on new or competing priorities or other critical diversions from our focus. You can see why practitioners may be reluctant. Take a look at the required skill set here for MTSS implementation and the emphasis on evidence-based practices. You can understand why this is a huge leap for many and takes a long time before it feels seamless and comfortable. The formula for success is fidelity of evidence-based intervention and fidelity of implementation practices. One of the reasons we haven't gone here as a whole is because there continues to be serious deficiencies with respect to our implementation knowledge and experience, meaning that we need to increase the number of practitioners who have a sophisticated understanding of evidence-based practices and how to implement them in context successfully and on a consistent basis. To that end, Pennsylvania has endorsed the efforts of the National Implementation Research Network, NIRN, and the resources that are provided to states and practitioners through CISIP and the Active Implementation Hub in order to guide our adoption and implementation of evidence-based practices. The first step is getting to work building in district-wide. It's the work of implementation that brings people together. It is also critical that the implementation team experience and market early wins to get others on board at all levels. These are the biggies: establishing implementation teams, having a thorough grasp of the stages of implementation, interweaving the 3 key drivers of implementation, and understanding improvement cycles. These biggies are all useful without first establishing an MTSS infrastructure and consensus that MTSS is the innovation, the strategy, the model that you are using to attain system change toward better academic and behavioral outcomes. If you pursue these before you have the infrastructure and broad consensus, then you're putting the cart before the horse. MTSS implementation is not an event, it's a process. It involves multiple levels of decisions, actions, and corrections, and it takes time, thoughtful planning, and action and continuous evaluation. The Active Implementation Hub outlines the characteristics of each implementation stage. NASD, the National Association of State Directors of Special Education, has also been very active in designing and sharing materials that help states and districts develop MTSS models. NASD has identified 3 stages of MTSS implementation: consensus, infrastructure, and implementation. This graphic further illustrates the stages of implementation that any organization will go through when developing and implementing MTSS or any other innovation. We're going to look more closely at these stages so you can evaluate where your system is now in relation to MTSS implementation. These are some of the characteristics that teams might experience during initial implementation. And this is what movement toward a sustainable model might feel like during full implementation. Competency, leadership, and organization are the key implementation drivers that teams must attend to throughout all stages of implementation and in order to sustain a viable tiered system. Finally, I'm going to show you a number of look-fors associated with well-oiled, effective MTSS frameworks. Now let's continue with our discussion of sustainability principles, practices, and outcomes. Pennsylvania's RTI SLD application tool was designed to also serve as a fidelity implementation checklist. We encourage all teams to use our tool to assess fidelity and prioritize next steps towards sustainable MTSS models. After you use Pennsylvania's RTI SLD tool, you can also look at systems level indicators: equity, efficiency, and efficacy. For example, in terms of efficacy, is your percentage of at-risk students decreasing over time? Looking at these systems level indicators relative to the outcomes you are currently experiencing is one of the best ways to determine whether you have an effective MTSS model and whether you are sustaining these outcomes. This information was taken from Keeping RTI on Track by Amanda Vanderheyden and Dave Tilley from 2010. The next few slides contain additional resources for you relative to sustainable MTSS frameworks. Please visit us at www.patent.net on the MTSS Initiative page and our Patent YouTube channel for more resources related to MTSS implementation. Thank you again for joining us today.